Okay, so I'm here with Alex Hickman. I'm going to do that again.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm here with Alex Hickman, the author, the owner, the producer of everything that's happening over at selfsovereignty.co.uk. He's also running the Self Sovereignty YouTube page and has the very popular podcast Self Sovereignty as well. Alex is a bit of an interesting character. He was a professional athlete, turned his eye towards some of the more esoteric, non-mainstream interpretations of the world. And, I think him and I have a lot of interests in common. And he's here graciously giving us a couple of hours of his time, and we're kind of try and dig a little bit into him, if that makes sense.
Thanks for having me on, buddy. Appreciate
Yeah,
it.
mate, absolutely. So it's a bit lazy to just ask you to introduce yourself, so I'm not going to do that. But I just want to say, what was the professional sporting club you were a part of?
So it was League One, professional football or soccer, depending on where you are in the world. And League One in Great Britain is, or England is the third level down from the Premier League. So you'd have heard of, some of the big names, Arsenal, Man United and all that. If you're not into football, you'd have probably heard of those. The team I played for was called Walsall Football Club, who are fairly local to me. And they were at the time in the third tier. Since I've left, they fell into the fourth tier.
Oh, no, because you left.
There you go. But yeah, so it was Walsall FC, League One.
All right.
I stopped playing when I was 20 professionally. I fell into non-league. Non-league is 2 leagues below that. So the 5th league from the top. I played there until I was 22. And then I just stopped playing.
Okay. And we'll get into later why you stopped playing. But I do want to sort of hang there for a moment and speak about that, how you're living during that time, because I imagine the lifestyle and also the worldview and sort of the interests that you take in are much different when your day consists of going to the park to train and then maybe going to the boys' house to play FIFA. Like I'm kind of picturing this is the totality of your existence, and then on the weekend you get all the attention because you're a famous footballer,
Yeah, I mean, there is a bit of a misnomer around that because you're not a famous footballer in League One. You're in the shopping centre. There's very few people know you or anything. It's only the people at the very top that people really know. But in terms of the dynamics of the changing room, it is very much that the unintegrated masculinity is running riot everywhere. The conversations are around women. You can imagine what a conversation is like. You are right in what that is like. But I never even through school, I never sort of fit in that, to be honest. That was like, I was reading in the changing room while everybody else would have been talking about shagging or something, excuse the language. So I never sort of fit into that. I'm a naturally introverted person. I don't really express myself to others unless I've built a relationship with them.
Okay.
So it was, I never fit in, and I'd always been captain of every team I've ever played in since I've been like 12. So it must have been like when I was in the youth team, I won youth player of the year or whatever the label is at the time. And that's quite a prestigious thing at a professional club, is to win that. I didn't win it because I was the best player, far from it. I won it because I was the most disciplined, courageous, work ethic. So that was more my dynamic, in a dynamic that was very extroverted. But you are correct. The dynamic in general is incredibly, I don't like to use the word toxic, but it is. That's why there's so much depression and everything goes on in the game that you don't hear about. And in top sports in the world, all over the world, you don't hear that spoken about often.
Is that a fact? So is there a lot of depression in professional athletes?
Yes, I don't need to look at statistics from academia. I've been there and I've seen it. It's rife.
Yeah. And is that just because everyone is, like you said, unintegrated masculinity? Like there is that alpha, everyone's trying to alpha each other constantly, whether it's written or unwritten. And maybe having too much competitive testosterone always in the same environment means that a proper hierarchy can't really form because you're constantly fighting for the level up. And then
I think that's
people
exactly
start
right.
to not fit in and they start feeling depressed and I don't even like this sport anymore.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, it's the prime athleticism of a man is between, let's say, 18 and 30, right? And this was prime alpha state. You're in a dressing room and everybody's at that same level. So as you say, there is no natural hierarchies taking place. Yeah, it was a very big growth stage in my life. Very big growth stage.
I can imagine
Enjoyed
though,
it.
there is something to be said about you willingly not participating in whatever the chat was, or just joining in to join in and not feel left out. That in itself is its own form of alphadom, you know?
Yeah. I think it was just a manifestation of my introverted nature. There isn't many who get to that level. I'm not trying to blow smoke up my own backside here, but there isn't many introverts who actually get to a professional sportsman.
Okay.
A very expressive thing. When you're in a team environment, maybe you know you can hide that a little bit because the others can carry that energy. But the vast majority, I reckon 90% plus, are quite extroverted and energetic, and they need to go out to the world in order to feel satisfied. Whereas I've always have been. I can just sit on my own for 2 or 3 days, perfectly fine, just reading and writing and whatever.
And so you were 20, you said, when you stopped playing for Warsaw.
Yeah.
By the way, I do recognize that club. I think I've played enough randomized FIFA games to have either played with Warsaw or against Warsaw. So I might have had you use the little avatar before.
Yeah, 2011, I was on there.
Okay, nice one. Yeah, the FIFA thing, like, but from when I was 16, 17, 18, man, I would have played thousands of hours of FIFA easily, you know, and that's 2010, 11, 12, those editions.
Yeah. I'd probably say I was addicted when I was in the youth team to FIFA. I played, I got to 110 in the world.
Oh, online?
Yeah. I got to 110 in the world. I was playing like the Chinese kids who just sit there
Oh,
all
yeah.
day playing.
They're no joke.
I was playing those boys. And then the one day I threw the Xbox out. I thought, this has got control of me. So
Nice. Yeah. No, it's a good move to make because like the video games are extremely seductive. You don't, like you said, you don't need statistics to know that. Just look around you at people that use it. It's another form of addiction. It's another form of escapism.
Exactly.
It's another way to turn your cheek to whatever responsibility you know inherently you should be taking on. But so I'm just interested about that transition, you know, because what you do now is also very individualistic, but it's also not the common route that people can really identify with. I mean, you're creating content. Like although all of us consume a lot of content, there's actually a very small part of the population that are producing the content, you know? So I'm just interested from a character perspective, you know, like what is it about you that goes from pursuing the professional athlete to then, once you maybe realize that Premier League is not within your potential, you, rather than going to take on another job, you decide to start writing about project sovereignty and everything else?
Yeah. So when I come out of football, I set up a personal training company. So I've never actually had a job per se, what we label a 9 to 5. I've been very blessed in that sense.
Really?
So I set up like my own personal training company. When you play professional sports, you in England and the UK, you get access to the Professional Footballers Association, the PFA, and they will pay for certain courses and university degrees and whatever else if you fall out of the game. So they paid for my personal training course. It was only a few grand. It wasn't nothing, extraordinary. And then I just set up my own self-employed personal training company, did very well at that. And that was how I bought my first piece of property then. So it was just through reading that I thought, okay, let's learn to invest with the money I'm making and whatever. And that's given me the foundation to now be able to sit here and create content. It's took 5-6 years before I was in a position where I financially ready to not need to get paid from content creation.
Yeah.
So when people say, "Oh, you're creating content," I'm not really. This is very much in its infancy, 6 or 7 months tops. I've been at this. It's not long. I don't know if I'd be doing that if I didn't have that financial setting anyway. I've got an income stream through real estate now, whether I work or not. So it's a bit of a cliche, passive income.
It is such a cliche, yeah.
And nothing's ever entirely passive, is it? But when you know rent's coming in every month or however, dividend on stocks or whatever, if you know that that's coming in, I think it sort of frees your mind. It releases the shackles that you've got on your insecurities. What if I don't get paid from my blog for 3 or 4 years or whatever else? That's gone. So I don't write for the financial benefit anymore. I write or do blogging and videos and podcasting, not for the money, but because I can speak to people like yourself who, I resonate with and I vibe with. So.
Yeah, lovely. So now you've figured out the financial side. You can actually just express your own interests to the fullest potential.
Yeah.
No, that's a really amazing thing. Something you said to me last time we spoke has actually sat with me quite a lot as well. And it was very simple, but you just said, I really like to read and I really like to write. And I was just like, yeah, well, I mean, it might sound to anyone listening that is just way too simplified and not very enlightened at all to say. But the truth is that you found this, and I think I've found this now. I know I really like to write and I really like to talk and I really like to read. And it turns out that I can actually pursue those 3 things, and you can build a life around that. And that's like, because everyone has a few things that they inherently, instinctually want and like and feel rewarded doing and naturally get energy from, irrespective of any other input or variable, whether that be money or respect or attention or love. It's like none of that even comes, but you just instinctually feel rewarded for doing something. And so that really sat with me as well. And it sounds like what you're doing now, is it fair to say that is the proper sort of manifestation of instinctually what you want to be doing? And everything else beforehand is sort of setting it up, the PT, getting into real estate.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think it's easy to look back, isn't it, in retrospect and say, oh, everything's led up to this point, because everything always does lead up to this point, regardless of what it is. So yeah, it is, but it's easy to say that. But I am of the belief that everyone's actually here for the same reason.
All right. Do you want to expand on that?
Well, yeah, we just don't know what it is, but most people don't know what it is. In my opinion, we're all here to, I don't want to get too esoteric and too woo-woo here, but it's essentially to illuminate your soul. Essentially, that's what we're here for. That's what I believe. And,
don't worry about getting too esoteric. I mean, I think people know what they're in for.
Yeah. Okay. So that doesn't mean running away from the world. That means actively participating in it. Because reality is your greatest supreme guru, right? This is why I have such a big problem with people on YouTube and everything that's, make $1 million in 6 months and all this, because they're trying to satisfy the hidden elements of our unconscious mind that is feels unworthy and all that stuff, not worthy of succeeding and love and all that other stuff. So when I say illuminate the soul, I don't mean I mean doing what makes you feel completely joyous at all times, whether the people agree with that or not, or people around you are thinking you're barking mad or whatever, is completely irrelevant. It's like what Ram Dass said. I don't know if you know Ram Dass. He said, we're all just walking each other home. And that's something I buy into that philosophy. I do genuinely think that. So me talking to you, we're getting to a certain point of illumination, however you define that. So that's whether I've explained that well enough. I don't know. I'm very wary of falling into the woo-woo trap with no practicality and pragmatism.
That's a really good point.
That's not what all this is about. We have to act in the world. And a lot of people go and think that they're Buddhist monks and go to monasteries and sit there for 10 years. Well, yeah, that's maybe some people's dharma, sure. But that's not most people's dharma. If you're born in the West, it's probably not. You need to get out there and act and create and do what you're doing,
I like that. That is a really good point, because I think that's where a lot of people turn their cheek to things that are esoteric, because they just say, look, whether I want to believe this or not, it's not practical. It doesn't mean anything to me. If you just say to me, well, just illuminate your soul. You know, it is a very bitter pill, very hard pill to swallow, and a hard thing to get into when there isn't any sort of connection to the real world, what you're actually doing.
And that because they separate. And this is one of the biggest spiritual flaws that I find it everywhere, all over YouTube and everything, is that people separate spirit from the world. They've separated the two things, and I think that's the biggest myth. I don't think that's true at all.
Can you expand on that a little bit more?
I can try. A lot of this is like non-linear. So my words, I'm not intelligent enough to actually say it. But essentially, if you look at mainstream religion, it's sort of created a don't live now, sacrifice yourself right now for the greater good, and you'll go to heaven. Dedicate your life to something, dedicate your life to everybody else other than your own happiness and your own joy, and then you'll live in heaven happily ever after. Now that creates naturally a hatred of the flesh, a hatred of everything around you, whether that's conscious or unconscious.
Why is that hatred? And I'm not pushing back. I just want to really, I want to open up what the idea means.
Well, it will happen naturally as a byproduct of it being ingrained in you that everything around you is worthless, which makes you worthless. Because religion says, live for heaven, live for your next life, don't live for now. So not living for now naturally makes it worthless. It doesn't mean anything.
Sure, that's a really good point.
Right. So, but spirit, on the other hand, so religion, that's the spiritual thing. That's what religion say. When you die, your non-physical body will go to heaven. Blah, blah, blah. Science, on the other hand, says, we're talking atheistic science here, the materialist stuff. They're saying it's all matter, no such thing as spirit. So then you get your like atheistic, dogmatic sciences that they're so close-minded that it creates a sort of, I don't know how to explain it. It creates as much of a dogma as religion. It's created its own religion. Science is now religious, which is to say, so boxed in, it can't open up. Now, if you merge the two, spirit and matter, if you know that they're one and the same thing, and that matter couldn't exist without spirit, this is what the breath of life is in the scriptures, and the Hindu scriptures is full of it, the breath of life. That breath is what spiritualizes matter, and that is how I'm sitting here in front of you on a laptop and a microphone. That is how it's created through the mind of man. Is there anything that has been created by a human being that has not first started in the mind?
I don't think so.
No, there's nothing. So that's not physical, right? The mind isn't a physical thing, not that you can measure it or whatever. So how now does science say that if it's non-physical, is it of the spirit? Most people would say yes to that because it's a non-physical thing, so it's of the spirit. So how can then science say that spirit is a non-reality? How can that exist? That belief system?
I think what you said about, and this is like a very, sort of well-argued point, ever since the new atheists rose and Dawkins, Hitchens, Harris became just in their own right, pop culture, guru leaders. And the answer is no, we're just sacks of flesh. Look at evolution. It explains it perfectly well. And that's great. Like, I mean, I also believe that, but what then is when they start to lose me on the argument is when they just start insisting that the scientific process is going to answer everything. And it's also like, yes, that's true. I don't want to argue against science, but there are so many questions that we can't even scratch the surface of. And it's nice to say, well, science will answer those one day. And that's great. But then there's also the question of, well, what's the separation between science and magic, And then what's the separation between magic and spirituality? Like it's when you make the point that everything starts in the mind of one individual or of the collective individual, there is more at play here than simply explaining that, well, this neuron paths to this neuron creates this connection, which then moves my finger, and that's life, and that's your explanation of life. And therefore, and then you start to, build your morality out of communities and cultures, and that's all fascinating stuff. And I definitely would lean much closer in terms of a worldview, much closer to Hitchens than I would with a rabbi, right?
Mm-hmm.
But there is that that interesting dichotomy, and I think it's actually a part of the internet which you and I sort of dabble in. Jung to Live By are dabbling in a lot. Like anyone who's taken a pretty serious look at Carl Jung, Eric Neumann, a lot of the characters that you're talking about, we're sort of trying to discover what is this, like, what's the bridge that's connecting these here.
And when I said at the beginning
I mean?
about illuminating the soul, that's it. We're all trying to figure this shit out. And my way of figuring it out is I fell down this path. So you mentioned evolution there. I'm a believer in evolution as well. I just believe that creation, in the term that the religious people use it, the creator or creators or whatever your belief is around that uses evolution as its means. So they're actually the same thing again. So we can never get to the answer. We can never get to creation or evolution until we merge the two. You can never get there. Impossible, because they're one and the same thing.
I wonder, should I ask a really unfair question? I was going to ask if you, what do you believe in? Do you think there is a creator?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to open that up for us?
An intelligence, whether it's it's definitely not like what people perceive to be a man in the sky and all that nonsense. That's complete, nonsense. But an intelligence that, in the same way that you have created this podcast and all your channels, you've created that thought, you've manifested it into the world, you've brought it out. If you create a scale so huge that a mind can do that and create what us and everything else, like an intelligent field, maybe 0 point field if you're a scientist, God if you're a religious person, or Brahma if you're a Hindu, Allah if you're a Muslim. So God to me is like an intelligent field. I mean, you could my office looks over I think it's a damson tree, and I can sit here. If I just sat here all year, there is no way that there isn't an intelligence behind what goes on in that tree. There's no logic, there's no academia, there's nothing that can write that.
Do you mean from the perspective of beauty or from the functionality of how it works?
The whole lot. Have you, I'll ask yourself and the audience, have you ever just been in complete awe at the magnificence of you're just looking at a view and you're thinking, fuck.
No, yeah, unbelievable. Just go to Norway.
How incredible. Yeah, exactly. The fjords and everything. So how incredible. I just think we need to live. And I understand the other argument where it's that's just your neurons and whatever else. I get that completely.
And you also will be, people will press back on you with an explanation for why the Dharma tree is exactly the way it is and why the fjords are exactly the way they are.
Sure.
Yeah.
Completely. And I completely buy that as well. I want to hear that. And I actually think that is probably what is happening. But what has created that happeningness? Yeah. How is that happeningness occurring?
It's a good thought, and it's fascinating. I don't know if you thought it was an unfair question or not, but I do like to sort of figure out, what is it that you actually really do believe? Because all of us are here just with beliefs. If anyone's trying to tell you they know, it's like, you get fucked, mate. You don't know shit.
Exactly. You can have degrees to the coming out your ass. I don't care. It's like our understanding of reality. I think that the scientific community in particular thinks that we are very ascended in our understanding of reality. I don't think we are at a point of enlightenment in that at all. I think we're so far away that we're blind and we think we are. Yeah.
That's a really interesting thread to pull on. I kind of have teetered back and forth on whether we are more enlightened than, say, previous generations were or not. you know, because it's very easy to say we are when you look around at the standard of living across the world, bringing people out of poverty, the just unbelievable logistics of food, of waste management, like all these great things. And for some reason, the fact that we can speak through airwaves, you know, in different countries, it's like, well, doesn't this mean we're enlightened? Well, it's maybe not. I mean, more people are killing themselves year on year. And further and further is the gap widening between society, between the introspective and the retrospective. And it's, yeah. And so I do wrestle between it, but did that make sense?
It did indeed.
Yeah,
indeed.
brilliant.
And very often I always say to, I don't always say to people, I'm very wary who I say to, but I say, go and take some magic mushrooms, or go and do a ceremony in Peru. Donald Trump, go and do an ayahuasca ceremony before you take the presidency, because you'll be a lot more in tune with everything around you. I'm not saying you'll be an enlightened person or any of that nonsense. Yeah. I'm talking, you will be more whole if you do it. And this is one of the issues I have with like psychology and psychiatry. A lot of them they're studying Adler, Jung, Freud, all these people, they're studying them. Great. We all need to. In my opinion, we should be doing that. Go and do a 5-gram dose of magic mushrooms, and it will completely shift your context of reality in an instant. You can keep reading all this stuff and trying to bring it into the world. That's great, and it needs happening. I mean, look, but we've never had so many psychologists, psychiatrists. We've never had so many, and yet more people are killing themselves now in the West than ever. So something's wrong. We can keep looking at these guys and studying them, which I believe we should, but there's something fundamentally wrong in the world at the moment. Yeah. And I don't think we're enlightened at all. I think we've fell, in my opinion.
I would really like to further pull on that thread, but first I just want to say one thing. So I'm just going to make a note that we don't forget it. But to talk, I think it would be really good to like ask each other, do you have any sort of explanation for why more people are killing themselves year on year? But I wanted to say first, you know that I'm really into Taleb, obviously, and whether it's just the proximity bias, the fact that he's so close to me, I fucking like mapping his ideas onto the world around me or not. But so I'm not sure whether he's a Christian, whether he's a Muslim. Actually, no, I think he might be a Sufi Muslim. But nonetheless, nice. He is a religious person, right? But he's also a fucking scientist, like hardcore mathematician, tries to map reality rationally on a piece of paper, right? Now, he's got a really, really good maxim, which I love. And he explains that we don't understand how the brain of a roundworm works, okay? And a roundworm might have about 100 neurons. So we don't understand the way the brain of a roundworm works. And that's because going from 100 neurons to 101 neurons doubles the complexity, okay? So, so
it's like logarithmic.
Yeah, precisely. And humans have billions of neurons. So you're like, yeah, you can map out our genome, you can map out the human body, you can even map out exactly what a brain is, but we don't understand the complexity of how it works. And if we can understand the brain of a roundworm with 100 neurons, right, we are light years away from understanding how a brain with billions of neurons works. And I just thought that's a really good maxim, because one of the biggest hole in the atheistic argument is explaining, well, and in the religious argument as well, to be honest, is explaining consciousness, explaining why these thoughts just swim around, explaining, that's why I think a guy like Carl Jung, he got as close as anyone's gone, maybe, to offering an explanation for this. But I just wanted to tag that in there in the context of what we were just saying. Do you want to say anything about that, or should we move on?
I think you said it perfectly earlier. I think you said we're all just holding beliefs. That's in my opinion, that's like an enlightened state of being. If you know every single person you're interacting with is holding beliefs and complexes and all these other things and labels that we put onto them, opinions and whatever. And so if you can grasp that you're at the start of, like, in my opinion, like an awakening, because you see the world as a contextual entity. Then you don't see it as like, he's wrong, he's right. Good, evil, all the dualities. You see it as like, these are the people that are operating in the same system as I'm operating in, and see the world in that way. Now, there are obviously better ways of thinking than others, in terms of like Hitler to Mother Teresa or however you want, obviously. And there's levels of consciousness that are going on everywhere, which is why we have in the West, or Sweden, obviously, and places like that, you have societies that operate a certain way. And you might go to Liberia and you might walk down the street and just get a bullet in the head. There's obviously different ways of operating based on different levels of consciousness, but these people are only operating within the same operating system at different levels.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
And that's where compassion comes in. It's like, oh, these people are they're operating with what they know, what they've got.
Yeah. I think trying to see the world that way also, it strengthens your empathy, you know?
Yeah.
I do have a mate, probably my oldest friend, actually. I went to a religious school and everything. He's one of the only actual religious people, right, that I know. Super dogmatic religious as well.
Yeah.
And you can see it sometimes. There's a breakdown in the chat because there is a certainty in the way he sees the world versus, well, you know, and it's not like there's an inability to acknowledge when there's flaws in the argument or gaps in knowledge. It's just like, no, I can see the flaws, but I'm nonetheless certain that Jesus lived and he's the Son of God and God's up there and he's looking at me and I need to act well to go to heaven.
Well, how different is that to Dawkins?
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true.
No,
the thing is, though, the Dawkins argument is more seductive because, well, for me at least, because you can map it onto the world much easier. It's hard to say, what, you're telling me God's looking at me right now and he's judging me? Well, I'm still masturbating and sinning all the time, but nothing's happening. You know, it's like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, is this guy even real? But then Dawkins says, no, we came from that tree and that monkey in that tree over there. And that's why we behave this way to certain things. And that's why we have these instincts. That's a lot more easy to sort of map. But you're totally right. What is the difference in the argument? They're equally dogmatic.
They are equally dogmatic. I tend to think that Dawkins is closer to reality than your friend. And Dawkins might be... have you heard of Dr. David Hawkins? Have you saw his work?
David Hawkins?
Yes. Power versus Force.
Okay, no.
You haven't got it. So we created a logarithmic scale, as you mentioned earlier. So 1 over 100 is exponentially larger, right? So we created a similar scale from 0 to 1,000. And between 0 and 200, that's like a negative energy fields. So that'll be like if you lies and deceit, pride. And then you get to a level of 200 and it hits courage. And that's when you start getting into the positive energy fields up to 1,000. At number 500, you get to what that he calls love. And then 540 is unconditional love. Dawkins and people like that are at the top of the 400s, which is, and Ayn Rand was in the 400s as well, who I've used in my capitalist model of the world. She was in the 400s. You can't cross that barrier into love. Carl Jung did, apparently. According to Hawkins, who tested all these things using kinesiology, Jung got to 540.
Yeah.
Freud got to 499.
Oh, Freud didn't cross it.
He didn't cross it. And Dawkins would be in the 400s somewhere because he is...
Just to explain, is this an expression of some sort, like, I don't know, of IQ? What's this an expression of?
Consciousness.
Okay.
If you imagine like an ocean and the depths of the ocean, and then you'd have below 200, it'll be at the seabed or something. And then as it goes, you get closer to the surface. If you imagine 1,000, to put it into a linear model at the surface of the water, let's use Jesus and Buddha and all that, people that everybody would know, they'd be at 1,000 or just below.
Individuated.
There you go, exactly. And you'd have Hitler down at 30, 40 or whatever, you know, Mussolini and whatever else down there somewhere. It's worthwhile reading. I suggest it to everybody because it gives you a non-contextual framework of reality again.
Yeah, that's interesting. I just wonder how he tests it. You said kinesiology?
Kinesiology, yeah. It's some of the scientific community buy into it now.
Okay.
There aren't many, but it's essentially it's muscle testing in the body.
All right, let's go back to what we said earlier. See if there's any commentary we can make on the year-on-year increase in suicides. So I do have thoughts in this, but maybe you want to start, or?
Yeah, I think parents are always a good place to start. I think they've had poor parents, and 2 generations down the line, you're going to get problems. I think that's one of the reasons. I think that people have lost tune with reality. I think they're so far removed of nature and everything like that. Antidepressants are far too quickly handed out, which is another problem.
Without a doubt, yeah.
Yeah, it's like if you're not about to jump off a cliff, don't take them, in my opinion.
And that's another synchronicity, man. I'll tell you why in a second, but go on.
Okay, so like if you're having a hard time, go through the hard time, because you're gonna have a good time eventually. That's like the duality of life. That's how reality exists, right? In the dualities. If you're numbing yourself down, so you're just flatlining, you might as well be dead. You're not experiencing nothing. There's nothing there.
There's nothing glorious in the middle.
No, there's nothing there. And once again, you can get all the statistics and everything. Just look around you. Look at young men that they've never ever been higher on record. I think Scotland released yesterday that they've had the highest ever death rates due to overdoses, drug overdoses. That's just masking pain again, usually heroin and all that, alcoholism.
Drugs are an antidepressant.
Yeah, exactly right. That's all that they're doing. It's just another manifestation. Funny, they never actually put on there how many legal drugs kill people, though. I'm sure they don't measure that as effectively as illegal ones.
So it'd be a sickening amount, Alex, really.
Yeah.
It would require...
So yeah, you probably know better than me, mate.
Well, I said it's funny, synchronicity. You said, unless you're about to jump off the cliff, you shouldn't take the antidepressant. That is exactly how I frame it as well. There's the stressor disorder, and only when self-harm is being threatened should an antidepressant be administered. Because to be frank and clear, antidepressants are an extraordinary intervention. What they are is terrible, and they should only be intervened if the other side of the coin is even worse, which is self-harm. And they're only there to make therapy more manageable, because it's hard to deliver therapy to a hyper or a manic person. So the antidepressants levels them out, so then they can engage with therapy. That's where they should be confined to. But then unfortunately, as you know, and as everyone knows, they're stupidly widely distributed, especially here in Sweden. You know, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head. I know that Sweden does per capita have some of the highest suicide rates in the world. And all the young people seem to have at some point in their life dabbled with antidepressants. It's kind of wild, man. It's really wild. Just in my...
Why do you think that is?
Now, that's a very good question. I don't know for sure, but I have a theory about the Nordics particularly, and the mainstream theory will say that's because they're fully secular and they don't have any more meaning with God. I think there is a element of truth in that, but I don't think it's as much as people attribute it to. I think the bigger problem in the Nordic countries, because as you may know, Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, like they have some of the highest, Iceland, some of the highest suicide rates. Physical things, it's dark for so long, right? That's terrible. And that's a very true thing. Winter depression is a real thing. But if you take that out of the picture, these are societies that are the most equal in the world, the most prosperous in the world, and seemingly have the most opportunities in the world. So if you're a young man or a young woman and you're in your teens or even your early 20s and you're looking out into the world and everyone's saying to you, you can do whatever you want. You're from Sweden. We're going to pay for your university. We're going to help you out with your housing. You should be able to do whatever you want. You can go to university, and then you look at yourself and you're like, well, I'm still a piece of shit. You know, I'm still stupid. I'm still failing at everything that I'm doing. You know, all my friends, because obviously social media is a huge factor here. I look on social media, all my friends seem to be living their exact lives. Why can't I find my exact life? And then that further manifests to the point where maybe they get antidepressants. And once you're on the, once you're on the drip, once you're getting the wean, you're in trouble, because like you said, it just levels you out. And life is the duality of inexorable opposites. The lowest lows only exist because you know what the highest highs are. And life is lived at the tails. Your best moments happen here and your worst moments happen here. Nothing happens here you're remembered of. Roald Dahl said a really good thing at the opening of his biography. He goes, life is a great number of small moments and a small number of great ones. And it's like, yes, beautiful. That's exactly it. Life is lived at the tails. The best things that happen to you and the worst things that happen to you at the tails. And if you're an antidepressant, you live in the middle. You're forced into the middle. You're chemically castrated to the middle. You don't have the ability to swing up and swing down, because as soon as you get bad, well, I can take a pill and I can reliably go back to middle. It's exactly the same with, booze, maybe not, but weed definitely, alcohol definitely, maybe even cocaine. It's like, I can reliably take this and it'll put me in that middle. It'll separate my anxiety from my body and I can just relax. But then nothing happens in the middle. It's a depressing state. But I think these combinations of things, mostly the fact that these countries offer everything, seemingly, and the individual living in it feels even more worthless for not being able to make it in a country like Sweden. Because if you are Sweden, you're like, everyone's saying to you, you're so lucky. Look at these kids in Africa. Look at these idiots in America. It's so hard for them. You don't understand how good you have it. And then you're still there, worthless. Oh my God, what am I supposed to do? So I hope that wasn't too rambly.
No, as a thought that just come in then, maybe that is a duality within itself. So our life is operating in dualities. That's how we experience. Maybe the freedom and the great life that we supposedly have in the West and in the Nordics, maybe the duality of that is the mental health issue. So maybe it is the duality within itself, rather than look at.
That's a very good point, actually.
I don't know. I've never read anything on it. That's just come to mind as you were speaking.
Yeah.
Maybe it comes as a byproduct of a freer society, because I know for certain people can't handle freedom. They can't handle responsibility.
You say for certain?
Oh, that's anecdotal.
Yeah.
Anecdotal, but go and hand people freedom, and a lot of people, and it'll end up like. With respect, somewhere like Liberia, somewhere like that, they'll be killing each other, raping, pillaging.
Interesting. Yeah. But yeah, that's a very sort of Nietzschean way to look at the world.
It's a bit nihilistic, but
yeah, but also the idea that there is like some people are inherently more powerful than others, or meant to lead others, meant to be in charge of others. That kind of idea. It's a very romantic idea to think about. But yeah, I'm not sure. But I think social media as well is. This is more particularly for younger people. I don't know about yourself. I don't look at Instagram anymore, but I did used to get anxious from looking at it, but never too bad. The cheap dopamine was offset by the cheap anxiety. It was never deep, right? But
what did you get from Instagram? What were you looking at in order to trigger that?
Oh, people I've met before. I mean,
their success,
just what they're doing, their life. It's like, oh, cool. Right. They're traveling, or he's having a good time, or why was I invited to that? And like these sort of things, right? And that's. But it is, because it's the same cheap dopamine. I think it's offset by the cheap anxiety. It's not deep anxiety, but it's enough cheap anxiety. Social media certainly has a strong hand to play in the depression, the mass depression of people in the West. Do you have anything to add to that?
The social media organizations, in my opinion, need to be held to account for their methods of that dopamine smack. I think they need to be held to account, because they're not bothered about giving you the truth or sharing anything of worthwhile to you. They're interested in attention.
Yeah. But then the question also becomes, I mean, you're into Ayn Rand. I mean,
Exactly. Yeah.
It's just like, well, they're a private company. Let them do what the fuck they want. You as an individual
Exactly
have
right.
to be strong enough to say, well, I'm not going to participate in this. But it is a great question. I do agree with you, actually. And this is a point we didn't expand on when we spoke last. But I don't see the world totally free market libertarian exactly for this type of exception. Total free market libertarian means Facebook can do whatever the fuck they want. Like they can teeter my Facebook to tell me exactly who to vote for, right? But that's my problem. That's my problem. But then I agree with you. I think they need to be held accountable. There isn't seemingly, other than government intervention, a way that they would be held accountable. Though I wish there was a better way, but I don't know.
I mean, I shared something on social media probably 6 months ago now, and everyone was moaning about censorship. And they were saying, I'm being censored. I mean, a lot of the people were like conspiracy people. You know, I'm being censored. I'm being censored. And I went, well, fuck off Facebook then. Leave what you're moaning on Facebook about Facebook for.
Yeah.
Get yourself on Telegram or MeWe or whatever else they're using now, where their whole business model supposedly is around non-censorship. Because it's created a market for it, hasn't it?
It has, yeah.
Censorship. So, very similar. I struggle with that because I consider myself a reasonable human being. Like, I don't want people to be fucking, have mental health illnesses and everything. But the other side of the coin is you need to take some responsibility for yourself. You need to become a sovereign individual and have agency over your own being. You can't rely on government, big corporations and all this to look after you. It's never ever worked in the past, and it will never ever work in the future, because that isn't the way human beings are created. We're not there to follow. We're there to own our own shit and to individuate.
That's a really good message. Unfortunately, it immediately becomes tied with politics, though. Immediately, like it needs to be separated, and that's kind of where Jordan Peterson, he did it until he got really political. That's exactly what he was saying. You need to take on your own responsibility and be an individual. Develop your own opinions. But then immediately it gets tied with, well, now you're a conservative because you want to take individual responsibility. It's like, fuck off, mate. The left need to take as much individual responsibility as I do. But that's a really good message, become a sovereign person, like resist tribes, resist gurus,
How many people are trying to fix the world and they're on antidepressants and they're out there trying to fix the world? How the fuck can you fix the world in that state?
Yeah. You certainly can't.
We all need to, in my opinion, we all need to individuate. We all need to illuminate our souls, or whatever you want to call it, and then go out to the world, not the other way around.
What would be a good place for people to start the process?
I think I'd suggest to people, I'm not a therapist or anything, or trained or anything like that, just feel the pain. That's what I'd recommend first. Feel the suffering that you've got within you. Stop trying to mask it with everything that you're doing. Stop the dopamine hits. Get off social media for a month and start to get in tune with nature. Get yourself a tent and go and live in the woods or something for a bit.
And try and figure out what your own opinions are.
Yeah, do that. But you can only do that once you're acting in the world as you. You can't do that by reading stuff. You can't do that by listening to gurus on the stage, because all you're doing is your malleable mind is being infiltrated by that stuff. The only reason I know this is because it happens to me now. This is how I still know it. I'm not past this at all. But I just know how I feel. Once I remove myself from this and then come back into the world, I'm a much more clean. I'm cleaner psychologically than I was before I went.
Yeah.
So this is what I do ayahuasca once. I'll do ayahuasca once a year for this specific reason.
Oh, amazing.
It sort of cleans everything out, or makes me question everything that I've put in.
Yeah. Are you open to talking about ayahuasca and your own experiences with it?
Yeah, sure. No problem, mate. Yeah.
So once a year, that's amazing. I really like that. When did you start doing it?
14, I think, 2014.
Oh, I thought you were 14 years old.
Oh, no, I wish. No.
Mate, a 14-year-old in ayahuasca would not be a pretty picture.
No, but the tribes in Once again, these are ancient tribes, and we can't use it in the modern Western world, but ancient tribes give pregnant women ayahuasca, and they also give, as soon as a baby's born, they drop some in as well.
No way. Why? What was the purpose of that?
I think it's just heritage and
Yeah.
because that they're very much in the spirit world, aren't they? They don't really believe in the world itself, so they just think it's a ayahuasca, which I agree with. I believe it's a
Connection
spirit.
with God. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why they do it, not so much for the tripping.
Do you go to the Amazon, or do you go to somewhere in Europe that has it?
In England, I know where there's like an underground scene everywhere, but I do it in England. Yeah.
Okay. Same people all the time. And so you started in 2014. All right. So now next year you're looking at the 7th trip. How is your worldview changed since you started doing it? What changed in you?
That's a great question. I think it's not so much a progression. It's like the via negativa philosophy again that Taleb talks about. It's more, for me, it's more of a stripping away, not an adding to process. So it strips away everything that I've picked up, everything that I'm not, stares at you in the face, and you have to deal with that. Any traumas that come up, like I was 2014. How old was I? 6 years ago, early 20s. The relationship I had with family members isn't the same relationship I've got now. I've got a much better relationship with close family now than I did then. And I do put a lot of that to ayahuasca.
Yeah.
But once again, that isn't because they've done anything differently. That's because within me, I've had to face the traumas or perceived traumas, the beliefs, the visions that I'm holding of other people, the complexes that I've created in my psyche just come up to the surface, and I just had to deal with them. So it's more the process of stripping away everything that you've picked up rather than learning anything new.
Right.
It's dealing with all the old shit. That's what happens for me.
I really want to do it. I had an opportunity to do it in 2015. I was in Cusco. In fact, I wasn't in Cusco. I was in the Sacred Valley, like an hour or two from Cusco. And I was working at a hostel there at the time, just at a bar. And I went with this random guy for a hike. And we're hiking, and we come across this fucking Fruit Loop of an old man and his ridiculously hot daughter. Okay. And we're kind of like, oh, this is interesting characters. What are they doing out here? They're very eccentric. And we started talking to them. And this woman was in her sort of early 30s. She was Canadian. She was married to this Australian guy, and they just lived down in this village. She pointed to it. And I was like, that's unreal. I mean, what the hell are you doing there? Kind of, because I couldn't fathom that, this person seemingly has their life really well put together is opting to live in. And she said, I'm a doctor. And I immediately thought, and this is me, 2015, very ignorant of all the drugs in the world except for cocaine and weed, right? So I'm just like, okay, well, what the hell is this? You're a doctor. That's fantastic. That's really exciting. I was like, that's really cool, because I'm also very young, impressionable, and I'm thinking that could be a really cool thing to do, actually. And she said, no, I'm not a doctor. I give them medicine. And I go, so like, you're a nurse. she's like, no, I give them medicine. And then this Canadian guy I was with fucking put me onto it. He was like, it's ayahuasca. I was like, oh. And she invited both of us to go with her to do it. And I said no. I wasn't interested because I didn't know anything about it. And then about, 1 or 2 years later, when I start meeting people who have done it and I start looking more into it myself, I'm thinking back to that moment as that could have been a major fork in the road that I said no to. Because this is also, not to give you my life story, but that time in the life was just before a major pivot happened, right? And I could have gone and done probably the most as authentic and ayahuasca experience as you could hope for, right? And I said no to it, and I kind of regret doing it. But that's just my dabbling, but I would really, I am actively looking to do it. Next year I'm going to Mexico for a wedding. So I'm going to try and figure it out while I'm over there.
Mm-hmm. I suggest it. If you've been called, then do it. If you've probably heard about it and reading up on it, you've probably been called. So get yourself down there and or find somewhere. Make sure that you do it with the right people as well. There's a lot of charlatans out there. Like the people I've come highly recommended in the UK where I do it, they're trained with the Brazilian tribes in the Amazon. So I've made sure that the people, you know, you don't want some little yuppie who's got hold of it, you know, who's just brewed it together, because it's a proper process where it needs to be blessed and everything else. It's not just put it together, drink it, and off you trot. It's not like that. It needs to be done properly.
That's actually kind of what I'm worried about. How do I go about finding a good person in Mexico? You know,
I don't know.
What would you say?
I don't know, pal. I have no idea. I know that there's a big tourist industry out there now in South America to do with ayahuasca. So you're probably better off finding someone like you did before, who's just on the side of the road, and you just fall down that path. That's probably the most authentic way of doing it. Yeah. You don't want to be going to like hotel packages. Stop at this hotel and we'll chuck in an ayahuasca retreat.
No, I'm definitely not going to do that. I also want to do it by myself, if possible. But I don't know. I know that might not be. Any
reason why? Because it's interesting.
To do it or to do it by myself?
Do it by yourself.
I guess I just don't want to be anyone. I don't want to be a burden to anyone except the person who's willingly doing it, you know? Because I don't know.
That's what I used to think that. I did it on my own twice. And then after the second time, they said to me, we know why you're doing it on your own. The whole reason you're here is because you need to do it in a group. Because I was very introverted and everything. So the next time I did it, I did it in a group. So the shaman said to me, something, I'm paraphrasing here, but something along the lines of, you suppress all your expression. You need to do it in a group because you're worried about looking like a twat in front of everybody. And I look back on my footballing career and it's like, you know what, that's probably why I finished playing, is because I was scared of the good opinion of others. And so that's why I asked you the question. Why do you want to do it on your own? Just make sure you're being truthful with yourself. Yeah.
Well, I guess that is the truthful answer. I think the other half of the coin might just be doing it with a bunch of strangers. It's not like, for instance, I'd love to do it with my missus, right? But she's not interested at all. So, you know, maybe I'll get around to it one day. But
I struggle with people I know because I'm worried about them.
Right.
I know I shouldn't be. I'm there. I'm thinking, stop thinking this. And it's like they're having a really hard time puking in a bucket. And I'm worried about them puking in a bucket, how they're experiencing everything. And I'm not taking care of myself. So I struggle now with people I know. I try and go with strangers.
Right. Just so you can leave it to the shaman and not let it disrupt you at all. Yeah.
You pay your money. You want to have the best experience you can. It's not about money, but you know, you want to integrate everything that it's showing you.
Yeah. I've just heard so many cool anecdotes of people who have done it, and it's made me think that this is something I know I would take a lot of value at, for good or bad. Because maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to just have my ego pounded to death, you know?
It's never bad in the long term, mate. That's one thing that 99.99% of people will say, is that it could have been absolutely horrendous at the time and for the months later, but in the end, it always, that duality again, you always get the equal and opposite positive side of it.
You talk about our society now not being as enlightened as people insist it is. Have you seen that through Tim Ferriss and some others, the psychedelic research for psychiatric purposes is now being funded quite a lot in the US, and it could potentially be the case that either at the end of our lifetime or in our children's lifetimes, psychedelic drugs could be completely mainstream. Do you think that might actually signify a more enlightened society?
Yes, but then does that solve the root cause again? Why do people need them? Why do people need? a small
Aren't
dose of
psychedelics?
MDMA.
Aren't psychedelics though? I'm speaking of mushrooms, ayahuasca here. I suppose MDMA, but not really MDMA. Not really synthetically produced things, not acid or anything like that. Just because in my mind, I separate psychedelics from the party drugs, which is, you know, the MDMA, cocaine, weed, and so forth. Like that they're enjoyed with others, whereas the psychedelics they're totally internal. Like you're not going to rock up to a party and drop a big mushroom dose by yourself, right? I mean,
Yeah.
but do you know what I mean? Like maybe perhaps taking the psychedelics could be for a lot of people, the discovery of the meaning that they didn't have without. If there was such a low stigma to taking it.
Yes, I think it's a big step up to big pharma and some of the corruption and everything that's going on there, without a doubt. People who are going to be using mushrooms and things like that in the future because they're depressed or they've got post-traumatic stress disorder or something like that, that isn't the root, is it? That isn't the cause of the problem. Why are we going to psychedelics again in order to fix something? We just need to stop it happening in the first place. So yeah, it's a big step up, but I don't think it's the answer to society's problems.
Let's turn this in on selfsovereignty.co.uk, which I noticed you changed to alexhickman.co.uk, but
it was Project Sovereign. It's now alexhickman.co.uk. I'm trying to make it me because the content that I put out isn't all to do with being a sovereign individual. It's about what I'm interested in. So that's where I put my name. Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit similar to your Atlas Geographica in the context that I just write about things I'm interested in. I noticed that there's a big issue in the personal development industry with people who have that dopamine shot again, where they get that dopamine shot in an event or a webinar or something, pay these gurus a ton of money, and then a month later they're in exactly the same place, just no cash in the bank. So I thought there's a big gap here. How can I bring what I perceive to be the highest teachings that I've ever come across? How can I bring those into the world without charging people an absolute fortune? I give 95% plus of everything I can away for free, and just charge nominal amounts for the rest. As I said, this isn't about money. It's a bit of a side hustle, to use a ClickFunnels or whatever his name. What's his name? ClickFunnels guy.
Business Babble.
That's it. Yeah, business. That'll do. Business Babble. Yeah. So yes, Matt, and you know what? It grows as I every day I change what I think Project Sovereign and I am on the internet. It changes, and it will evolve as I evolve. I'm doing something soon similar to what you did with Taleb's work.
Okay.
With the Inserto. With a few different people, I'm putting their articles, which a lot of people don't read because they're so long. I've read them, I've made notes on them all, and I'm going to put that in an 8, 9, 10-minute video for people to summarize them all.
Perfect.
I just think that just gives a good service to people who, like, for example, there's a guy called Michael Tazarian. I don't know if you've heard of him. I value his work quite highly. And people don't really know him. He's not very well known. So I'm going to summarize his articles, put them on my page. The amount of views, the amount of clicks and all that sort of secondary to making sure that the content's out there for people to actually, do you know what I mean? Like the content I put out with you yesterday, previous to that, it's been a lot of the COVID stuff, how that's been handled, capitalism, stuff like that. When I put yours out, the thumbnail wasn't great, to be fair. I was thinking, what should I put in the thumbnail? And I lost like, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3% of my subs. I haven't got many subscribers, but I lost 2 or 3% of the subs because it was completely different to everything I put out before.
Is that a fact?
Well, yes, 100% yesterday. And that isn't because the content.
Sorry, mate.
No, not at all. But it's nothing to do with the content itself. In fact, I'd actually suggest there was more in that podcast than any of the others. It's just that the subscribers that come through previous to that, they're not interested in creating content online and being the best version of yourself. It's been COVID, how we can overthrow some corrupted government. And that just isn't me.
Right.
But that's how the subs have come in, just because I interviewed a couple of people.
Yeah.
So, it's just the way it is. And I'm sure it'll balance itself out. So the people who are interested, it might fall another, 20, 30%. I don't know, in the next few weeks as I start putting out content.
Right.
Because it is very new. As I say, I've done one video completely unscripted about me starting to eat meat again. That's the one video I've put out about me. The rest have just been podcast episodes.
Yeah.
So,
well, I like the trajectory it's going on. And it's true. Something you said there is so true. The likes and views is a secondary thought because at the end of the day, on the competitive domain of the internet, longevity beats whatever the trendy content of the time is. But the sort of things that we're doing, you're moving away from a hyper niche that you might have already developed. Generalized content is much harder to swallow. It's a much more difficult thing to wrap your head around. But the great thing is that once someone does get on board, they're on board with you, and they're now on board with what you decide to put out there. And that's that's a listener that is worth a lot more than a passive listener who just they're subscribed to all of the COVID conspiracy channels on the internet. You have any other ambitions for your different channels?
No, I don't. I'm not a believer in goals and long-term visions and things like that. I'm a believer in here now and doing the best you can with what you got and what you know right now. So,
nice.
Yeah, there's a big vision. You want millions of people and watching your stuff and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But if that doesn't happen, I'm perfectly satisfied with that not happening. It's just, I enjoy writing and I want to get better writing. But the process of learning and actually writing itself, is far more of the goal for me, is getting better at doing it than if it gets picked up by Harvard. Not interested so much in that. It's more becoming better.
Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. I think the same along those lines.
And there's a lot of people out there like what you did with Taleb stuff. I think that was brilliant. I do. Because there's a lot of people who just simply don't read, but want the best bits of that book. It's fucking lazy people, in all fairness. It's just lazy folks. But in my opinion, it's a great service to go out there, put what you did, the Inserto, all the books, go through all of them, put it out over, 2 or 3 hours of video footage or whatever it was. And that's there forever then for people to go to. It's a timeless thing. And it's what Taleb says, isn't it? That the older something is, that's why a lot of his stuff is mythology and everything, I think, because it's never going to go out of fashion, is it?
Precisely, yeah. It was very cunning for him to have done that. The Lindy effect you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Something to live by.
It's true that, it is lazy to go onto the video book summary, but it's like, I kind of do that as well. And I think I've actually, I really like it as a medium between the book and the idea, because if you watch the video and you're like, oh, that's actually pretty decent, you're then likely to go on and then absorb it for yourself and then create your own interpretations of it as well.
To be fair, you're a bit more willing than probably most people, that hence why you're starting a channel and everything. I don't know if most people do that. I think that's you. I do that as well. Well, I watch stuff on YouTube and then I'll read the book based on the summary of it and things like that. But I don't think most people do that. I think they probably just watch it and then
forget about it.
Done. Yeah. I'm a YouTube expert at all, mate. I know some of the videos that I watch. I can't believe how they get so many people looking at them. I don't understand. I think it's mind-numbing.
Yeah.
A lot of it.
Yeah.
That's where we're at as a civilization. And that's simply as it's just the society is a reflection of the collective ego. And the collective ego wants numbing stuff because it can't deal with reality. So if you get your arse and as a woman, get your arse and your tits out and put that everywhere, you're going to get followers, aren't you? It's just simple as that.
Simple as that.
So if you're putting educational content out, your market share is a lot smaller than arse and tits.
Yeah, it definitely is. You said a representation of our collective ego, but sort of, I suppose that can show in what our collective interests are.
You don't find many people buying anti-fragile. There's very few people who pick up that book.
Mm. And it's kind of
But
a meme. People only buy the Black Swan so they can have it on their bookshelf and actually read it. So that all the top investors can show that they've read the Black Swan.
What about the your podcast? How's that performing in relationship to YouTube? The Inserto podcast.
Much better. Much better. And I think this is purely down to just different algorithms. In the podcast space, the audience is more knowledge worker, more sort of closer to our demographic, I think, in terms of what countries we're from, what kind of upbringing we had, what kind of interests we have, versus the infinite YouTube algorithm, which is mostly, young boys, like kids. So I think it's really consequence of that. And I'm also the only person that has it on there. Yesterday was the biggest day ever. It got,
Nice.
it got 400 downloads in one day,
Nice.
And so overall the podcast is actually performing really well. So, that's really encouraging for me. And that's actually, at the moment, it's my favorite thing to do, because audio is second to writing on the hierarchy of things I enjoy. And it's cool because I write this script for a Nassim Taleb podcast, and then I record it and then upload it. And I'm really excited by that. So that's actually going really well, which is very encouraging.
Good for you, man. When you script them, do you write the whole script, or do you just bullet point things and then read that out?
Bullet point things, for sure.
Okay, with you.
Yeah. And I'll kind of say it. I look like a madman in the cafe, but I'll kind of say it as I'm writing it and just making the bullet points. So then by the time I'm recording it, it's almost like the second draft.
Yeah, I'm with you.
It was actually on antidepressants and anti-fragility, the episode yesterday. So that's kind of front of mind, which is maybe why I subconsciously steered towards it.
Yeah. Well, it's a big subject. It needs to be talked about rather than running away from it.
It absolutely does. It costs a lot if you have a kid that's manic, he's hyper, and you're a regular family, it costs a lot of money to get intervention, psychiatric intervention. And it makes sense to put them on antidepressants because, they're more manageable then. And it's just such a shame that, the easier path is the path taken. I say in this podcast, I use my brother as an example. It was a big deal. It was a lot to handle as a kid, and the question was definitely offered to my parents, like, should he start taking an antidepressant to sort of level him out? And they said no, thank goodness. And now my brother is, I'm extremely proud of him. He's 19 years old, and he's head and shoulders in terms of maturity and empathy and compassion than a lot of his peers are. It's quite remarkable. And I know for a fact that he wouldn't be like that if his developmental years were stifled by the chemical castration,
Good for him. Yeah. There's another sign for another sign to not numb yourself down with anything, including antidepressants. Just feel it as deeply as you possibly can. That's all.
Feel it as deep as you can. And if it gets to the point where you can't take it anymore, maybe that's when you should intervene. But yeah. I mean, you only know how good things are because you also know how bad things are. But Alex, okay, so look, I wanted to ask you a little bit about Magic Egypt. I don't know if it's worth speaking about. Are you interested in that? Have you sort of watched the documentaries?
Magic Egypt. What do you mean by that? Give me the context.
What's his name? The British guy who made the documentary, looking at and how he proposed that the Sphinx was actually the Sphinx was about 10,000 years older than they carbon dated it, and that it was actually there when the ancient Egyptians came along.
Yeah, to be fair, there's a few that have said things like this. Gosh, yeah, it's a huge subject, mate. As I think I said last time that we spoke, it's like our history is not as we've been told our history is. I'm very confident of that. And ancient Egypt holds mysteries and secrets that the symbols are all around us still today. You've got the cross, the Christian cross, and then you've got the Egyptian Ankh, Ankh, and one comes from the other. The cross comes from the ankh. And if you don't start looking at these symbols, myths, for example, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, things like that, if you don't read these things, you can never understand modern day religion. It's impossible. So you mentioned the rabbi earlier. It depends how deep the rabbi is. Probably the standard rabbi, you're probably right. He wouldn't know as much as Dawkins. He probably isn't as worthwhile talking as Dawkins. But someone like, for example, Taleb, who's maybe a Sufi, as you said, Sufism is the mystical branch of Islam. And I think Taleb's a lot more into mysticism than he actually lets on. I don't think he says it.
I agree, for sure.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
So yeah, when you talk about magical Egypt, the whole Old Testament of the Bible is an initiation, right? That's all it is. It's an initiation. It talks about tribes of Israel. God, you could. It's like saying, "Talk to me about Judaism" or something. It's like, fuck, how do you start?
Yeah.
Christ rising 3 days. After 3 days, that's they used to put initiates into the Great Pyramid. Initiate them. They used to lie down there to stay there for 3 days and then rose again on the third day. So Jesus rising again on the third day is a symbol of initiation into the higher mysteries of life. So if you don't understand these things, you're reading the Bible as literal and your guy is Jesus is the Son of God and blah, 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 all that stuff. Well, yeah, it sounds nice. It's a great image and a great story that I don't have to take responsibility for my own life and myself to become a son of God. Well, yeah, that's great, but the reality is far different to that. It's incredibly different. Go on, buddy, go
on. The only reason I brought it up is just because I really want to expose myself to more ideas, and it seems like you definitely have a whole corner of your experience is knowledge that I would never even heard of, right?
Yeah.
And so I just was trying to engage that side a little bit. As far deep as I've gone as Jung and Nietzsche, right? And they were far more mainstream than, for instance, the idea of magical Egypt. So I mean, I'm just trying to get on that.
Jung's a great example because I know he's sort of there's people out there. Jung to live by, I think, say that he more or less lost the plot a little bit. And I think they said like couldn't get over his Christian roots, something like that. I completely disagree with that. I think he went far past his Christian roots. Hence the reason they think he's gone mad. If you look at the tarot, the tarot cards. Jung talks a lot about tarot as a map of the human psyche and the symbols. The symbols there are from ancient Egypt. They're not. There's a lot of Christian dogma in them, but they're all from ancient Egypt. So you've got the 18th. It looks like I'm just spitballing little ideas here, but you've got the 18th dynasty pharaoh called Akhenaten. Now he was the Moses of the Bible. You wouldn't know that unless you'd actually told that. But he was the founder of monotheism. Before that, it was all polytheistic religion, numerous gods. He was the one god, Akhenaten, who worshipped the sun. Right. Aten, A-T-E-N at the end, is where we get Adam and Eve, Adam, Aten. Akhenaten is the sun worshipper. So when we have Christianity and Judaism and all that, they're actually worshipping the sun. Jesus, the man, was of a lineage of pharaohs. You can read a book by Ralph Ellis. I did an interview with him yesterday called Jesus, the Last Pharaoh.
No way.
Yeah. And he talks about, obviously this is just revisioned history. Take it with a pinch of salt, do it yourself, learn yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
Always a pinch of salt, but nonetheless fascinating.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. You sort of feel things, right? You feel if it's resonating with you, if you're in tune.
Totally.
And this guy, I feel him. And academia hate him, which is a wonderful sign. And he basically says that Jesus was a warrior king, and he led the Jewish revolt against the Roman Empire, and that's why Rome used Jesus, the figure, as this holy man to sprinkle a load of sawdust on him to actually move the attention from the warrior king to some holy guy who was the son of God. Yeah, and Akhenaten had ginger hair. Proven fact, he had ginger hair, and Cleopatra had ginger hair. Nefertiti had ginger hair. Where do we find ginger hair?
In Irish
We don't
people.
find, right? And Scotland and Ireland and the British Isles, right?
Oh.
Why isn't there much consideration that there was a migration from the northern Europe down to Egypt?
There
It has been
was? I'm not
spoken
sure.
about in the past. Yeah, I think there was.
Okay.
I think the lineage of pharaohdom was of British heritage.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which is.
I can see why it's
Britain.
controversial. I can see why people
Yeah.
want to just slap that down. Yeah.
Exactly. And I'm British, so to sit there and say, "Oh, the pharaohs are British," I can understand why people will go, "Oh, you're just fucking British." I get that. I understand that completely. And it's very possible, which Ralph Ellis believes, that they went the other way. The reason we have ginger people in Ireland and Scotland and the British Isles is because the Egyptian, a certain class of Egyptians were ginger and they come here. So Ralph Ellis thinks it was the opposite migration.
You know, something, just a weird coincidence as well. Like Genghis Khan was a redhead.
There you go.
Mongolians are not redheaded.
No, exactly. And Alexander the Great as well.
Was he actually?
He was indeed. So there's another one. So they either migrated this way or we did that way. But Alexander the Great apparently was ginger. Akhenaten, he's probably the most famous pharaoh, one of them, along with Tutankhamun.
Mm-hmm.
Akhenaten's daughter, Scotia, Scotia, was found buried. I think she was found buried in Ireland or Scotland, but that's where we get the name Scotland from.
Scotia still is.
Yeah. So, all this stuff is like a jigsaw puzzle. And unless we can try and put all the pieces together as logically and as reasonably as we can, but it's impossible to do that without an air of mysticism.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't do it.
And do you think that air of mysticism is there because it has to be relied upon to explain the gaps? Or do you think it necessarily proves that mysticism is a part of these stories? Yeah, because I kind of struggle between, is it possible that we can exactly rationally explain everything around us? We just don't have the capability yet. And so the gaps are filled by mysticism. Or is it the fact that mysticism is there and it has to be a part of the explanation?
I don't know the answer, but
no one knows. But just as a,
I'm stuck in that. I'm stuck there as well, and which is why I like Ralph Ellis, because Ralph Ellis puts all these myths and everything into the ancient record, whereas a lot of religious people put it down to just spiritual mumbo jumbo.
Yeah. You've said it before, but it's totally true. Like the history that we've been told is the history we've been told, but that's not the one that actually played out. And you can, I forget exactly where I heard this, but you can see it as recently as like 2010, revisionist history happening, just because what happens on the internet is the articles with the most views rise up. And just because they're the most read doesn't mean they're true. Doesn't mean it's the fact. But whoever's writing the history determines what the future generations know. And so I actually find like there's an arrogance to just, for instance, you're presented with this idea that Jesus was from England. Yeah, massive idea, right? But there's an arrogance to just say, no, that's definitely not true. Because you don't know. You don't know. Exactly. Like, listen to what this man has to say, balance it against all the other evidence, and maybe it's bollocks. But the other side of the coin is, oh my God, maybe it's true, And that's
well, the other side of the coin is, by the Christians, is that he's born of a virgin. His dad was a carpenter, and all this other stuff. It's like, come on, pal, you can't just believe that on blind faith and then not even consider.
Because it was in this 2,000-year-old book.
Yes,
you happen to have the right book.
Yes, which has been changed so many times. You look at the Council of Nicaea in AD 325. I think it was Constantine the First. I think that was essentially the Roman Catholics turned around and went, right, that is how we're going to lead the world using this. And although it's been changed, you've got the Protestant movement and everything, and the Enlightenment period in Europe, we're still so heavily stuck there. The Vatican holds that much power
Mm. You think to this day?
Oh God, yeah, without a doubt. I mean,
Do you-
even I can speak for myself that we don't. I still run patterns. I've never been religious, but I still run patterns of Christendom, the martyr.
Right. Oh, so you're saying that they hold power because of the history of their religion and what it's done to the non-culture. Okay. Not like a modern day sort of finger in different pies manipulating power.
That could be like a conspiracy conversation. Do I think that happens? Probably.
Yeah, you
Does
think
it
so?
happen with? Yeah, I think so. I think that there's the black pope and the white pope and a grey pope. Why don't we know the black pope and the grey pope? Why don't we know these people?
There's a black pope?
Yeah, exactly. There you go. You've asked the question. Put it in on Google now and you'll find him.
Wow,
So
is
there's
that
a black
fact?
pope, a grey pope. Why do we only know the white pope?
Do they have the big ceremony for him as well?
I don't think so, because it needs to be hidden. It's still out of sight.
Yeah.
And you get the Venetians, and mate, that's like a reading library that could take you.
I'm sure. Well, perhaps you could point me in the right direction. You know, apart from alexhickman.co.uk, where's a good place to go? Because, like I said, I watched your ancient history course and I thought it was fascinating. But you know,
oh right, okay, cool.
Where else should we go?
For what in particular?
To your understanding of your worldview, if you wanted someone to teeter as close to that line as possible, where would you start them?
Flipping it, that is. I'm trying to think of where I started, to be fair. I think it would have been somebody like Rudolf Steiner. Like the Western magical traditions.
Okay.
Yeah. Helena Blavatsky was a big one. You have to take her with a pinch of salt as well, but she was magnificent with what she did and put out into the world.
That's not the Alexandria woman, is it? No.
Helena Blavatsky, her name. She died in early 20th century.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
If you can get, John Anthony West.
That's the one. That's the Magic Egypt documentary. Yeah. Yeah,
John Anthony. There's quite a few people like that. Immanuel Velikovsky.
Mm-hmm.
Mate, you could just go on and on. You go back to, if you want to look at Atlantis. Yeah. I even think science has even actually admitted that now. I'm fairly sure it has.
That Atlantis exists?
Yes. Yeah.
Isn't it in this rogue African nation just east of the Western Sahara, I think?
Once again, man, there's loads of theories. I think the accepted theory is that it was in the Atlantic Ocean, which makes sort of logical sense. Atlantic Ocean. And you know the Azores in Portugal?
No, I don't.
It's like a small group of islands, Azores.
Mm.
And they're like the last remnants of what was Atlantis, apparently.
Mm.
Who knows? I sort of do buy into that, just because Atlantic and Atlantis, it's sort of just language is literally magical.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah. I love when Nietzsche, nothing put lead in his pencil like etymology. He fucking loved it.
Mate, I mean, in fact, the video that I'm going to shoot, my first real one talking about like the summarizing the articles, is about the magic of words. It's called In Words We Trust.
Oh, amazing.
Articles.
I'm looking forward to listening to that.
Yeah, and he talks about the root of all words could actually come from bird song.
Okay.
Which is nature, basically. Which is why the letter A is in the shape of the letter M is in the shape of mountains. The S is like a serpent. Like language and letters have actually been created for us as symbols and as a mirror of nature, but we've lost that magical connection. So language is now on its backside, which is when you get people like Hemingway and people like that who are just genius writers. You connect with that nature again. You're connecting back with the magic of the language, which we're missing. Keep your eye out for the video. I'll try and do it justice.
I will. And I think maybe that's a good place to leave it on, eh?
Yeah, good for me, man. Yeah.
let's, do you want, so obviously I will include, links to all your work, but perhaps there's, you want to say something before I go? I mean, it's not like this is going to get huge exposure, but nonetheless,
No,
what I'm really hoping, Alex, is that, it sits on the internet and it can be evergreen. It's something that, when people fall into your, world, they're going to be Googling you. They're going to be searching your name. And then that's, this can almost be an inflection point of a certain time stamp in time, which is also really cool, I think. But
exactly, mate,
what do you want to say?
I've got nothing to sell you or anything like that. Subscribe to my newsletter. That'd be cool. I send one every Sunday. I do actually put a few hours into that every week. It's, in my opinion, it's one of the best I've come across, is my own newsletter, to be fair. I just pack it with stuff that I've learned during the week and authors and articles and whatever that I've come across that I think are highly valuable. Sign up for the newsletter. Check out the website. There's a few free courses. As you said, the ancient history webinar that I put together, and there's a how to escape wage slavery free online course to break yourself from that societal trap of 9-to-5 slavery, which is a form of slavery, unfortunately. Yeah, man, just check me out. YouTube, subscribe, like, ring the bell, and all that other good stuff.
Amazing. Thank you, man. I'm so stoked that we sort of found each other, because it's there aren't many people out there sort of operating in similar frequencies, I think. And I don't know, I get a real kick out of that. So thanks for giving me all the time this morning. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to watching your channel grow, because it's, in my opinion, it's on an inevitable trajectory, which is exciting.
Thank you, and likewise. I actually put your channel in my my latest newsletter. To be fair, I said it's one.
I did see that, and I am very happy you did. I think I got like 40 or 50 subscribers out of it.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah,
I'm happy for you, man.
Yeah, cheers, fella. All right.
Ciao.
Cheers,
buddy. Bye bye.